Welcome back, everybody, to Monday Moment of Envy. I am joining you guys here from the studio, and Brendon's joining us from his home. Hey, man.
Hey.
So we just got back from an awesome trip in Oregon. We were hanging out with Kurt Kise, Drew Armstrong, John Maurice Henry, and also Kyle Kephart. And we are actually featuring Kyle Kephart today for the Monday Moment of Envy because he has an image that Brendon just pulled up from our Facebook group that reminds us of this trip, and it just makes us sad that we're gone, that we're not there anymore.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There were just amazing rocks and amazing waves, and we had some amazing skies too, which he says a lot of people that live there in that area say doesn't happen that often. So we were quite lucky to have a week
Seriously?
of only one day of rain, and the rest was pretty great.
Oh, man. So before we go into the compositional stuff and start bragging about being in Oregon anymore, what is it about this image that steps out to you that makes it stand out from the other group?
The colors really, you've got a lot of the cool, I really like the color blue, and the bottom of this image is just got that really nice white and light blue from the ocean water. And I've fallen in love with that color over the last week. And so this thing just jumped out to me. This is deeper in the group. This is back in April 16th, I think is when he posted this. So,
That's a long time ago.
And he actually took this picture last year. So he says he took this last year as a winter time. He says his coast starts getting interesting in the winter, like we noticed. It definitely does. He said this happened in like normal tide. I think he wants to go back when there's a higher surf and a higher tide. So this might have been similar to what we experienced. Was the swells weren't very high, but during high tide and low tide, things changed so dramatically.
Oh yeah.
And so depending on the time of day you go, and each day is going to be different, you're going to have a different cloud, sunset, you're going to have different tides. And so the scene is just constantly changing, even in the same exact location.
Right. It is. It's crazy nuts. And in all the pictures that we have featured on Monday Moment of Envy, we're trying to give you guys some real obvious compositional examples. There are images out there that are more of an experience, a feeling, an atmosphere than they are A, B, C, D compositional step has been accomplished and it looks awesome kind of image. And in this image, there are some elements of both. It kind of is going to transition us to some images that, okay, we like this. There's balance in it, but why? It's far more abstract, and it's challenging sometimes as a photographer when you're out there on location to see these things. So let's compliment Kyle on the work that he did here with some of the ways that he took a very difficult subject, but a very compelling subject, ironically compellingimaging.com. That's his website if you want to see more of his work. He got something here that doesn't have these leading lines, the normal foreground object. How do you make the water splashing in front of you, the foreground object like he has here, or what do you do with the walls and the rock walls? So I want to go into a couple points here, and then Brendon, you chime in with everything else I keep missing. But when you look at a composition like this, where you don't have that obvious centered or off to the right or left image or subject that can be your focus, that can be your obvious foreground focus, get it in a nice balance, and then lead that with other leading lines towards the rest of your subjects in this image. He doesn't have that. You look at his image and we have a shape off to the left, a shape off to the right, and these two triangles. These two triangles that frame the image, but only the lower third of that image. You look at this image in thirds, and you've got just water, just white, blue, green water in the front, and it's spraying all sorts of directions. It's chaotic. It's not consistently pointing one direction versus the other direction, but because of the scenery, the situation, he's not telling a story of uniformity and simple and pattern. He's not telling that story. He's telling the story of chaos, breaking, crashing, parts of water going every direction. And so the fact that water is going every direction in the way that he has the exposure and the length of a shutter that he has is perfect. He's telling that story very well. You get the mood. I swear I can smell the sea salt in the air just looking at this picture. And I feel my feet getting a little colder just looking at it because I know getting out to the spot must have been that challenge. Then I go to the middle third, that part part where we have some seagulls causing a small tangent with the rock, but you get a great image. You got to keep it, and that wave was more important than this little seagull right there. You got a situation of big, bulky, heavy rocks taking up most of the frame and coming over, and then a little bit of a parallel shape. You've got this shape up front of rock, and then that distant shape of rock. And even though this is a tiny little bit of rock on the top left behind that wave, we have so much context in the foreground that helps our eyes know what we're looking at. We're like, okay, yeah, that's just more of this rock. And because he has this rock in the foreground nice and sharp, lots of light contrasting and in focus, we know what we're seeing, we know what we're looking at, and seeing these other ones, we get it, we know what this is. He even has a lot of this in silhouetted shadow up here, and it's still solid because you know what you're looking at, you have context. He's already given you the context that you need. So then you've got this image, and if I were to draw a line from the top right third, or the top third to the bottom third, and draw a diagonal straight between it, Brendon can't see this from where he's at, but I've basically cut that perfectly in half, and the shape of the rock covers that triangle really well and fills that volume up and then overlaps just a little bit. And then the strongest point of this rock right here is that it leaps into the top third. It breaks the plane into the top third where your eyes are brought to clouds, very interesting dynamic clouds, and the orange of the sunset. It's just getting a balance of just sky, big batch of rock, bunch of rock, and then having these V shapes point you down. You're getting a leading line by a negative space. You're not getting a leading line that is positive space taking you through. It's just the negative space being drawn by these shapes is giving this V chalice look all the way back to the vanishing point, to where we see more ocean, till we see an infinite amount of ocean, till we see a horizon and the sky. It's just very well balanced. If he had center weighted this, it might be strong still, but it might not be strong at all. I like the fact that he has it off to the left, leading our eye up here to where the most color is, and then we kind of do that swirl into the rest of the space in the top right.
So then what I like about this image is the more you look at it, the more you get that calm from the sky, calm from the seagulls floating, and then because you're grounded with this crazy, jaggedy chaos, right?
Yeah.
And then as you go up into the image, you get this soothing colors, and you get this. And so it's this crazy emotional balance going on too.
Interesting.
They're constantly conflicting each other, and then you get the rocks shooting up into the calm sky, but then you have the cool, calming colors of the ocean as well. And so you get this really cool, you're just swirling around like, a whirlpool of emotions in just the color balance alone. And
That's
so I
interesting.
think that's really, really cool.
That let's coin a term called mood gradient. It's a mood gradient. As you go from stormy, calm, or stormy, chaotic, crazy up to the top left, it goes from crazy to calm in a gradient, a mood gradient. What an incredible way to draw a story with only a single frame, thanks to that.
Oh yeah. And I love the detail of the waves in the background too, gave me a little bit more context to the waves in front of you, as you can see it rising up and creating that color as well, and complementing the color that's down lower.
Yeah, you're right. If you look at the bottom third only, you would struggle to see and understand where the water's splashing and hitting. But because the waves up here have that same motion and you can see their shapes, you can kind of pull out the shapes that were getting lost in the foreground as they overlap each other. And so their context is being drawn there. That's a very good point.
So another thing that Kyle mentioned to me as we met with him this last week, he said that he was working on getting a better way of the splashes. So he says most people do either really fast shutter and get a splash frozen in time, or they do a long exposure and they get a nice smooth, but then you miss the detail of the flash. And in this image, this is the example he was talking about. He says, I'm trying to find the perfect balance. And he's been doing research and learning on how to capture enough of the splash to keep it some detail, but then also let the smooth come out as well. And this is the perfect example of what he was mentioning in that.
Yeah. These look like the tines on a rake instead of being a wave that is either completely blurred together or completely frozen in time. He still has their direction of their droplets all drawing streaks. Kind of like steel wool art with water. So,
and he says and it's been difficult to get that. So that's why it's cool to see this. He did this a year ago, and he's still trying to master it. So it's cool to see that journey take place. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Before I go into my last concluding statement, do you have anything else to add to the composition?
I love the color contrast on the rocks. I mean, you get the great highlights of that wet rock, and that rock really is that black, guys. I mean, this rock is volcanic rock, and he did not like do crazy contrast to make these darker. They literally are this black and dark in certain spots on the beach.
Yeah, it's so beautiful out there. It's so different and contrasting from the white, foamy waves.
Yeah, and unless you were actually there in person, you wouldn't realize that, you wouldn't think that the rock could literally be that black. It's just obsidian black rock. So.
Right. I think it's basalt, right? It's basalt.
It's really cool. I'm not sure what it is, but it's awesome.
So my last concluding mention of this is that we get in situation, guys, where you like an image, and then you look for those typical ABCD composition techniques, rule of thirds, leading lines, color balance, just weight of image structural balance, and something in the foreground to focus on. And then you get to this spot, and you're like, I love this spot. I want to take a picture of this spot. This is awesome. I don't have any leading lines or obvious leading lines. I don't have a foreground subject to go and focus on. Not in the center or off in the third like I would really want. I mean, look at Nick Page's photography. There's always something kind of in that third or off in the center that is a focused feature that he's nice and focused on and leads you to the rest of the image. Aaron Bobnick will have these flowers that would go up the hill and have a vanishing point that lead you up the rest of the hill. It's not a leading line like a railroad track or a gate or a fence or a post or something that typically is drawn very, very obviously. And his leading line, it isn't one subject. His leading line comes into play, like I drew earlier, with the shape of these V's, the chalice shape of these rocks that are kind of carrying the volume of water that's in here. And then you go through that to a vanishing point, and that leads you to the upper thirds of the shot, the middle third and the top third of the shot. And so your leading line might not be obvious. It might be a negative leading line, meaning positive space, negative space. Positive space, railroad tracks. Negative space, a canyon gap. And both of these walls that reach the cliff edges of that canyon that lead to that negative opening that is the leading line. I mean, there's ways to get leading lines with something that's sticking up or something that's gaping down. And so you get to a spot like this and you think, I can't get all those A, B, C, D or compositional elements. Well, you try and focus on what you can. And if you focus on 2, 3, you key in on those compositional elements and get your balance right, your color balance right, or even go for our new term, mood gradient, you will have a strong composition even without the other elements. Don't get hung up on having 5, 6 great compositional elements. Key in on 1 or 2 and make the rest of your image balance with that.
Yeah, I think just go out and experiment and try things out, and you'll be surprised. Just going out there and making it happen is what's really going to be the best experience, I think.
Absolutely. So good job, Kyle Kephart. Thank you for driving 2 hours in the morning to be there. He left at 2, 3 a.m. to join us at the bridge.
Yeah.
And then he did it again the next morning. It was the next morning, wasn't it? The next morning to join us down at Cannon Beach. And so, Kyle, thanks so much, man. We had a blast hanging out with you. Don't want to forget to mention John Maurice and also Kirk Keyes and Drew Armstrong. You guys, thanks for hanging out with us this week. It's been a fun listener adventure out there in Oregon. And just seeing these rocks was a great finale to go, oh, man, I'm really going to miss that watery amusement park that is the coastal region. It's so cool. So great job. Go to compellingimaging.com and read Kyle Kephart's blog. Check out his photography. He's got some really good stuff. Thanks for being in our group, Kyle, and the rest of you in our group. Keep throwing images our way. We're getting lower on some of the most obvious compositions. So if you have something that's really good and you haven't posted it yet, post it now. Help us get something good for Monday Moment of Envy the rest of the year. So thanks, guys.
Okay, see you guys.
All that we touched it all. So
do you think it needs to come towards the front of the face of the rocks or just turn up more?
Maybe we should just crank it up all the way and then face it towards the rocks and see how that affects it.